So not only is Tony Romo on basically going on injury reserve, I mean, there's another quarterback in the league, another big name, face of the franchise quarterback going down with injury in week 2, and that's quarterback Jay Cutler of the Chicago Bears. And, the Chicago Bears in week 2 were just not great at all. They were just torched against the Arizona Cardinals offense. The Bears defense was just, picked apart piece by piece by piece. I mean, it was just nothing was going their way. Their defensive backs were just tormented. I mean, there was also a play where I want to say it was, Shea McClellan, who the inside linebacker for the Chicago Bears. He was even torched in coverage. I know he's a linebacker covering, but you know what? You got to make a play for this team. And you know what? There was a play that he could have actually, either got the interception or potentially, broken up a touchdown. But, it went for the touchdown. I don't know if that was one of 3 Larry Fitzgerald touchdowns. But needless to say, the Chicago Bears in that game against the Arizona Cardinals did not show up. And now they start their season at 0-2. And this is where it really the Bears needed to get, back on their A game in week 3. They have a huge week 3 matchup coming up against the Seattle Seahawks. And, like the Chicago Bears, the Seahawks are surprisingly, they're 0-2 on the year. And this is going to be a game which, both teams are just itching and scratching for the win. And I think right now, the Bears are lining themselves up for an 0-3 to start the year. The Seahawks have, they've done great things on their offense. Their defense is good, but there's a lot of, mental mistakes that have happened on their defense. But needless to say, the Chicago Bears, they're not going to be without Jay Cutler. Before Jay Cutler went down with an injury against the Arizona Cardinals earlier in the game, he was right on his way to being a very accurate quarterback that day. He was 8 for 9 for 121 passing yards, or 120 passing yards with a touchdown and an interception. But needless to say, those are some good stats that he put up. That was an 88.9% completion percentage, and that is good for what Jay Cutler was doing. He was making all of his right throws, and I think this is a year where Jay Cutler really needs to, come back around and really get back into being a little bit more accurate, make the necessary throws. Last year, it was not too hot for Jay Cutler. I know he played in 15 games last year. He had 28 touchdowns, but a lot of turnovers, 18 interceptions on the year, sacked 38 times. This offensive line needed to step up, and the offensive line did not step up when Jay Cutler went down. Kind of like how Tony Romo was. The offensive line just completely, failed for Jay Cutler and also for Tony Romo. So now that both teams are now going to their backup quarterbacks, and both teams are running only with 2 quarterbacks in their roster. Right now the Bears do have Jimmy Clausen, a guy who I honestly just do not feel as the guy that's going to end up turning this Bears season around early and giving them that first win, because right now the offense of the the Seattle Seahawks, they put up points. The defense of the Seattle Seahawks, they can do some damage, and I think that this is where it's going to go. I think the Seahawks will beat the Bears. They're going to start their season at 0-3. That's just my prediction right now, and they've got to find a way. Jay Cutler has got to be ahead of his rehab schedule, because they're going to need him back so fast if they're willing to save their season. I know the Lions are not playing above expectations. They are also 0-2. The Minnesota Vikings, I want to say, are 1-1 on the year, and then you have the undefeated Green Bay Packers, who are standing tall, very tall and proud right now at the top of the division, the best team in the NFC right now. The Chicago Bears can still turn their season around. They're only 2 games into the year. 0-2 is not a great start, but there's still a lot of room to really turn things around. I know following the Seattle Seahawks game, they are going to be, I want to say, back at home against the Oakland Raiders, and they're back on the road for a 2-game stretch with the Chiefs and the Lions. So they got some division games coming up, as well as the nice 2-game set against the AFC West. So right now the Bears have, they got to put a lot of faith in on Jimmy Clausen. I do expect David Fales to be signed off their practice squad to back up Jimmy Clausen while Jay Cutler is out with injury. But right now it's not a exciting time to be a Chicago Bears fan. They really got to turn things around, and if they can pull out a victory against the Seahawks, I would give a lot of ups to the kind of offense that they are running. But we'll just have to wait and see on everything going forward for the week, and how Jay Cutler does come back from his injury.